Tonight, we're going to have the Korean War Commemoration, 1950 to 1953. And I've got a panel here that's going to talk, and it's quite a panel. There's one member missing, John Stevens. He was supposed to be here tonight, and I want to tell you a little bit about John Stevens. John Stevens is a hero. He retired as a lieutenant colonel, but he was at Pearl Harbor as a young enlisted Marine. And then he was in the Battle of Okinawa as a Marine lieutenant. And then he stayed in the Marine Corps, and he was a company commander of Able Company, 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, when the Korean War started. And they mounted out and sent the Provisional Brigade to Korea, the Pusan perimeter. And that brigade saved the day. And John Stevens led the counterattack that broke the back, the very last North Korean offensive on the Pusan perimeter. He then loaded aboard ship. He landed in the first wave at Incheon, and you've seen that picture of Lieutenant Lopez going over the wall. That was Lieutenant Lopez of Able Company 1-1, one of his platoon commanders. And it was John that recommended Lieutenant Lopez for the Medal of Honor. Then he fought the battle to liberate Seoul, and then he went up to the Chosin Reservoir. His battalion commander was Lieutenant Colonel Ray Murray. He made Major General, but he was Lieutenant Colonel then. He was the commanding officer of the entire 5th Marine Regiment as a Lieutenant Colonel. And he looked around all these officers and staff NCOs. On all the officers he had in the regiment, there was one officer that hadn't been killed or wounded, and that was John Stevens. So that he figured his number was up, and he told John Stevens to fly out to evacuate Chosin Reservoir as they were withdrawing. But John Stevens is a hell of a hero. I just want to tell you, if he would be here tonight, he could tell you things about the Korean War that nobody else can tell you. I hate to see that he couldn't make it tonight. But if they tell you, if you want to live to 100, don't fall. And he fell yesterday. So he hurt himself. Yep. And he's home now, but he's kind of in pain. The rest of our panel, I'll do them in order of the rank here. Gunnery Sergeant Denny Weisgerber served as a platoon sergeant with the 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. He was with Item Company, India Company for us new guys, but Item Company. He fought the Battle of the Muckle War on the Western Front of South Korea in 1952, where he was awarded the Navy Cross for bravery. Next we have Sergeant Don Reid. He served with the 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines as a machine gunner in 1951 and 52. He was part of the last major offensive of the war at the Punch Bowl and beyond on the Western Front. Don Reid, Sergeant Don Reid.
Thank you, sir.
Next we have Corporal Wally Stewart. He served as an infantryman with the 1st Battalion, 1st Marines in the concluding year of the war, where the casualties remained high in 1952 and 53. And then we have Corporal Oliver Johnson, the United States Marine Corps, served as artilleryman in 1950 and 51 with the 2nd Battalion, 11th Marines. It's going to be a good panel discussion.
We know there's no glory in warfare. However, victory was gained in this very, very important war. The United Nations, led by the United States, stopped communism secured peace and freedom for the people of South Korea. And I'll tell you a secret, save the United States Marine Corps. Harry Truman, I admire, but he had a distinct opinion that the Marines were undeserving of all the recognition that they were receiving. He called on the United States to resist communist aggression. He appointed General MacArthur, and General MacArthur then called up the reserves, and the only force that he could put together was, in fact, the United States Marine Corps. And then General MacArthur said, Marines, you go and protect Pusan. And then after you do that, land at Incheon. And then after that, take Seoul. And then after that, march up into the Chosin Reservoir. These were incredible requests, but the Marines did it. He changed his opinion with regard to the Marines, and the Marines continued to serve. Let me describe to you what would have been the landing at Incheon. It has been said many times that the Incheon landing was unusual in the annals of amphibious warfare. From the point of view of the most unusual aspect was the limited amount of time available to absorb the large number of replacement and additional elements that had no recent combat experience, and to absorb the landing plan and complete at the company level, as John did, planning the necessary procedures to conduct a different kind of landing. A landing where you were not landing, you were climbing up ladders on a seawall into a populated area at dusk instead of at dawn, and all without practice or rehearsal. Did he do it? Sure thing. He did it indeed. I have the pleasure now of standing aside and letting a member of the Chosin Reservoir, the president of the Chosin Reservoir locally, Oliver Johnson. Oliver?
I guess you can call me the typical Marine that young, 18 I think at the time when I went in, and I was in artillery, which you learn very fast, and we landed at Incheon, went into Seoul. After Seoul was taken, then we went back to our ships on STB ships, and we went to around southern portion of Korea over to Wonsan, which is almost like going from left to right from the Incheon to Wonsan, but we went around the island, and we were going back and forth and back and forth for weeks, and we couldn't understand why. And when we found out later on that the whole area was sea mined, it had mines all over the place, and we couldn't even make an appropriate landing at that time. So we finally, after that was done, we landed, but at that time, the North Koreans had already slipped past and went up north. And so we landed at Wonsan and traveled all the way up to the Chosin Reservoir, and everything was fine and so forth. And we're in this big valley, and the reservoir is like just a block and a half up the hill. And but then all of a sudden we're starting getting incoming mail from here and there and there. So we had to send out squadrons and so forth to counteract that. And because we were losing guns here and there and people. After that, we took a trip maybe 10, 15 miles further up the coast, not the coast, but closer to China. And I don't know why we did that, but we did it. And then all of a sudden, we have a Thanksgiving dinner. Well, the war is going to be over. We're going to go home for Christmas. Yeah. We got to a point where we needed more infantrymen in the battlefield, so they took a lot of artillerymen and put them into infantry. And you'd be surprised how many World War II vets we had in the artillery. And so they stayed with the guns, and we were out on our own. And this is where the fun begins. We realized that the Chinese had come in, and they actually tore up everything all around. There's only one road out, and that's the same road we came up. And there's no other road to get out. The Chinese know it, we know it, so they put up blockades and all this kind of stuff, and go on down and having different little battles here and there. And the weather, again, is 30 below, and the standard gear is a field jacket, gloves, not mittens, and we had a Parker. And that's what you had. Mm. And you had snowshoes, which you learn how to adapt to that. Mm-hmm. And I had a carbine, which is probably the worst thing to have in a freezing cold weather. But anyway, it all worked out fine. Mm-hmm. And the battle to get out of the Chosin, 17 days. Is the battle, and there were no food stores, no place to rest, no place to warm up. At least I didn't find any. And you could stand on top of the mountain and look to the left and look to the right, and you don't see one inn. You don't see one end down there, and you don't see one end down there. It's just one big, long, massive line. And on top of all that, we had 70 or 80,000 Koreans, family men, people. They were on the tail end of this line that we're going out. And they came along and they stayed out of the way, but we brought them down into South Korea, and I understand through the talk going to town that now they have an extra 1.5 million in South Korea of the children's and so forth that developed from the 60, 70,000 we brought down.
Thank you, Wally. Well done. That was a wonderful effort. I'm 18, and I had just arrived in Korea and joined in the last major offensive of the war. And I learned when I arrived there around 6 p.m. that I was given the 4 to 8 watch in the morning, and they said, "Don't worry about because we're jumping off at 5." Which we did in the punch bowl operation. We were very committed. We were highly motivated, and we were extremely well prepared. We took the hills without a doubt. I was an ammo carrier. All I did is carry ammo up to the machine gun and take out the wounded. And that was my experience for the first couple of weeks, and took up a lot of ammunition and took out a lot of casualties, which we had. At that time, there were a number of battles going on around the Punch Bowl, Bloody Nose Ridge and Heartbreak Ridge, and we took a couple of hills, 749, 812, 1052, and the morale and of the Marines was really terrific. We were the first group, among the first group of individuals that had enlisted with the idea that we knew we were going to go over to Korea. That was uppermost in our minds, and we weren't disappointed with that expectation. I moved up from an ammo carrier to the machine gunner over a period of 6 months, and we encountered a lot of combat during that period of time, and many of the persons who had served up at the Chosin Reservoir, who were still with us in the 1st Marine Division, they were all being transferred and sent back. One situation remains up in my mind, and that is Brute Krulak. He was then a colonel, and he was serving as a chief of staff, and he was an innovator in the Marine Corps, and he participated in an operation called Operation Bumblebee, and that was the largest movement of Marines in combat, and they moved a full battalion, 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, on October 10, and that's noted on the official calendar of the Marine Corps, as a matter of fact, up to this date. And the number of casualties which we incurred was considerable, and we fought many of the battles there. In 51, where Pete McCloskey and Eddie LeBaron, prominent local individuals and heroes, served with us. And I'd like to say a word about the enemy, and I'll say this: the North Korean army was well trained, and they were committed, and they were steadfast, and they were really dedicated to save their country. And if you recall, or perhaps you don't recall, but the origin of Korea was mostly northern, because that was where the industry was, and that's where a lot of the strength of the nation came from. And the south portion of the Korea was in fact agriculture, and it wasn't as much an area of development as the North Koreans. But the North Koreans were really committed and dedicated to taking their role. Now, when you think in terms of the energy, of the success and domination of how South Korea has done, just imagine the very same thing in North Korea. They're the very same people, and they're just as committed. So it's going to be a real effort to have peace over there, but I'm hopeful that that will ultimately occur. And we moved over to the west coast of Korea, and when the peace talks really began, because that was seen as the invasion route, and they wanted the 1st Marine Division to protect that area up near Panmunjom and Seoul, and which we did. With that, I'll cede to my successor, who's a gunnery sergeant, platoon sergeant, Denny Weisgerber, who served with me. And Denny?
I'm going to stand up because I'm hid from these people over here, and I don't want them to think I'm not going to talk to them, because I am. But You know, Mr. Johnson talked about being from the chosen few. I'm the chosen one. And I mean that in a humorous way, but when the Korean War started, I was in radio school in San Diego. I joined the Marine Corps in 1949. At boot camp, I went to radio school at Camp Pendleton, then we moved it down to San Diego. And first part of 50, and the Korean War started. I escaped from the radio school and went back to Camp Pendleton by request. And I was a chosen one. I was one of the few that was chosen to meet the troops coming in from the reserve units and the garrison troops and so forth from all over the country. Meet them at the railhead at Oceanside and bring them up to the main area, the 17 area, to be reclassified. These guys would come in, they were recruiters. They said, what's your MOS? I'm a recruiter. I said, okay, pick up that rifle, you're going over there. Well, the sad part of all that was that we had reserves who had never been to boot camp. And we sent a lot of those kids over there. Well, the commandant got word of that, and we found out about it, and of course, thunder hit the fan, and we had to start interviewing these kids. But some of those first Marine Corps people to go into Korea got their boot camp on the fantail of a troop ship. Well, again, I was the chosen one, because I wanted to open up Tent Camp 2, which was from World War II, had been closed except for reserve units using it in the summertime for a summer camp. We went out and opened it up and started the 2nd Infantry Training Regiment out there. I went through training with the regiment as we started. I was assigned to go to Korea in December 1950. And it was about almost Christmas time, and they said, okay, we'll let you guys go home for 10 days, and when you come back, we'll ship you out. So we went home for 10 days for Christmas and came back. We loaded the trucks, sent them to San Diego, and I'm standing there in the middle of the parade deck with 4 other guys, and the trucks are gone. Here come an older than me now, gunnery sergeant across there with a pad in his hand, and I said, Gunny, where's our transportation? He said, what transportation are you looking for, boy? And I said, we're supposed to be with that convoy going to San Diego, and they board ship. Picked up his little chart and asked our names, and he said, no, he said, you're here. I said, well, let me tell you something, Gunny. I said, our sea bags, our rifles, everything we own is on that truck going to San Diego. He said, you see that big Quonset hut over there? Go over and tell them you want to draw some new gear. So I stayed there for 2 years as a tactical instructor. Well, along about the 1st of May of 1952, I said, you know, this is stupid. I'm on an extended tour. I might as well just re-enlist and get it over with because I'm a career Marine anyhow. I re-enlisted on the 1st of May of 1952 for 6 years. Got a big $360 bonus. I was big bucks in those days, really. But that was on the 1st of May. My birthday is the 5th of May. Lemuel C. Shepard, who was the new commandant of the Marine Corps at the time, sent out an Almar. That's a bulletin goes out to all Marine units. Said any Marine that had 6 months or more to serve or had not been in Korea in the last 6 months would be ready to leave the next day. So that was my happy birthday present. I sent my pregnant wife home to Idaho to be with her mother to have our baby, and I shipped out for Korea. Well, I got over there and I joined Item Company 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines in July of 1952. They were in the rear. They'd just come back off the hill. I went in and found my bunk, laid my stuff on it, got acquainted with a couple of guys, some of the finest gentlemen I ever knew. And the whistle blew and away we went, and we're up on the line. I guess I'm also one of the chosen few because I was there a very short time, but I lived through it. I was in Korea 101 days. I was in combat 98 of them. How many of you are familiar with the All Quiet on the Western Front, the movie or the book?
Yeah.
Well, that's where we were. We were on the Western Front of Korea in trench lines just exactly like that. And we'd had to defend those trench lines because, as Don said, he was in the last offensive unit that went through Korea, and they messed it up, so we had to be on the defense. I can say that because Don's a very good friend of mine, and I trained him when he went through tactical school at Tent Camp 2.
Yeah.
But they said that, you're going to hold this line. Well, the line was north of the 38th parallel. We were about 6 miles north of the 38th parallel. Reason for that, that's the way the hill line went. Trench is 5 feet deep, 3 feet wide, shoulder to shoulder, going down through those trench lines. Well, there were many nights that we caught incoming. And I know a lot of you are going to say, well, this has got to be a sea story, but we caught incoming to the amount of 300 to 400 rounds in 24 hours. We would be buttoned up in our bunkers for 12, 14 hours at a crack. And when we came out, the Chinese would be in our trench lines trying to take the line away from us. Well, we were very fortunate in repelling most of them. And in October 1952, they started their big offensive, their winter offensive, to go further south. And somebody said earlier the peace talks were on, and they wanted, to, of course, to move the thing down south of the 38th parallel if possible. Well, they overran 3 of Item Company's outposts. We had 1 with a platoon on it and 2 in squad-size units. I took my platoon out to take back the 2 squad-size units. We got 1 of them back and got pushed off the other one. My buddy took his platoon out to recapture the big one where we had lost 1 complete platoon, all but 4 guys. Well, they got that hill back. I reported to the skipper what had happened, and he said, tomorrow night you're going out and take that hill back. And I said, okay. So I got my guys together, got a couple of replacements in, got them all up. The next night I went out across 1,000 yards of rice paddy to the base of the hill, sent up a flare to raise our covering fire so we could get in there. And we got pinned down by crossfire machine guns. Every man in that platoon was under cover. I rolled over a little knoll there, and I found a fire team to my right in a little ravine, and we took off to the top of the hill to knock out the machine guns, which we did. I got to the bottom of the hill, and one of my guys was missing. Went back to pick him up. He couldn't walk. He was badly wounded. I put him on my back, started down the hill, got about 3/4 of the way down. That's where I got wounded. But I want to say something about those guys. I was 22 years old. They called me Pop. I mean, these kids were 18, 19 years old. The staff NCOs were 20, 21. I was one of the oldest guys out there. But to a man, they defended that line. They defended that country, and they fought for folks that we did not know, who we'd never met, to give them a chance at freedom. Well, the upshot of this raid that I was on, 82 millimeter mortar went off between my feet, killed my Marine. I was evacuated. Result of that was I lost my leg and I lost my career. They retired me May the 1st, 1953 on a physical disability. I have been a Marine since 1949. I'm still one today. That's 65 years ago. Every one of those young men out there, just as a young man I met tonight who's going to boot camp this coming weekend, is that right? He asked me a couple of questions, and I give him a hard time, but the young kids like it. Would you stand up for just a second, please? I want you to look at this kid. That's who we were when we were in Korea. Thank you. Believe it or not, as fat and ugly as I am now, I looked about like that when I went over there. But I'm proud to say that I served in Korea. I'm proud to say that I fought for your country and for my country. And I'm proud to say that that is not the forgotten war. Those of us who were there, South Koreans, all other United Nations, Americans, and especially the United States Marine Corps, will never forget it.
Let's hear it for Denny Weisgerber. I might also mention that Denny was awarded the Navy Cross, the second highest decoration for bravery that our country can give. Our next speaker is Wally Stewart.
That's a tough act to follow.
Oh, you cleaned it up, Wally. Come on.
I went in the Marine Corps July 1950, went through boot camp, went to Camp Pendleton, 17 years old, went through all their training, and then the gunny here kicked me out. He said, you can't go, you're only 17, so you're gonna have to go to posting stations for 2 years to get a little experience. So by 1952, October, November, I was a corporal. I was pretty sure I knew everything. I arrived at my unit in Korea, Baker Company, 1st Battalion, 1st Marines. What'd they do? They sent me to NCO school. What? NCO school in a combat zone? Yes. So I spent my first 3 weeks in Korea training before I was finally reverted back to my unit, where at 0331, I still was in the infantry. I had a machine gun number, but I had to do my yeoman work, earn my spurs, so to speak, with the rest of the guys in the trenches. And that's what they were, literally. As Gunny said, they were trenches, and we had advanced outposts, sometimes hundreds of yards, sometimes thousands of yards, that had some very colorful names. Reno, Vegas, Carson. What? Well, it was such a gamble to be out there, we had to give them Nevada names. Siberia, yeah, there was Siberia. East Berlin. East Berlin was one place you would never want to go. But I've spent a number of very terrifying nights on East Berlin. We were defensive, and we had air power. So as a result, the days were rather innocuous. We spent our time in the bunkers, planning what we were going to do that night, and that usually involved recon patrols. If you ever want to test your mettle, take a recon patrol. I usually preferred 4-man patrols because they were quieter, but sometimes we went out in squad, 10, 12 guys. You're walking out in the middle of no place. Hopefully there's no moon. You know darn well the Chinese are doing the same thing. They're running recon patrols. By today's standards, our communication was archaic. We actually laid sound power phone cable. One of the guys in the patrol had a pack, and in the pack was a roll of wire so that we could maintain liaison with our checkpoints, with the company commander and the whole sector. So you're out there in the middle of no place. You had to get through your own lines. You had to make contact with the enemy, find out where they were. By contact, we'd like to leave that at visual. Our orders were usually fire only and self-defense. So that brings back some memories when we took refuge and had Chinese patrols that were passing so close that I thought they could hear my heartbeat. And our only salvation was in that close, we would take the pin out of a hand grenade and hold it, hoping that they wouldn't spot us. If they did, the first thing we wanted to do was deploy that grenade, and then we used the expression bug out, get out of here. So the Chinese became very, very aggressive the last few weeks of the war. Once the war or the ceasefire had been signed, there was about 3 days, as I recall, before it went into effect. Those 3 days were hell. We encountered as many casualties in that short a period of time as we had in the month before that. When the war finally ended, we were under strict orders to lock our weapons, keep them loaded but locked, and don't fire unless we were informed to fire. Fortunately, that didn't occur. We eventually watched the Chinese come out of their holes and tried to figure out why we didn't spot them when we were looking for them. Yeah. But we did get away. We moved back from our positions, and in the finest tradition of the Marine Corps, the very first thing we did when we got back was have a junk on the bunk inspection. And our 782 gear was in the world's worst position. But that was the Marine Corps for you. We had the inspection, we had rifle inspections, and I'll never forget the lieutenant colonel that inspected us came up to me and he said, Stewart, what are your rifle sights for combat environment? I couldn't think of my rifle sights, so I just said 5 clicks elevation, 2 clicks right windage. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah. But I'd like to call special attention to the fact that we're all in the 1st Marine Division, but the leader of the 1st Marine Division at one time was our own General Myatt.
Well, I would like to wish our hero, Lieutenant Colonel John Stevens, a speedy recovery from his For me, it is always quite moving to meet all Korean War veterans who have fought so valiantly and sacrificed so much. 67 years, and I feel that the most best way to always show our respect and gratitude. I mean, it's never enough for us to show our best way to show our gratitude. But I like to just talk about the one great war, the Chosin Reservoir War, which in Korean we pronounce it as the Chosin Reservoir, where the United States Marines made noble sacrifices for a country they never knew and a people they never met. Korean War marked the first time that the United Nations had ever approved the use of force. And the most heroic battle they fought in the Korean War was the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, the Chosin Reservoir. Thanks to the incredible fighting spirit of the warriors of Chosin Reservoir, the Hungnam evacuation operation, which saved over 100,000 refugees, could succeed. And at that time, among the refugees who boarded the SS Meredith Victory were the parents of the current president of the Republic of Korea, Moon Jae-in. The late Captain LaRue received orders from General Almond to save the refugees, and in order to make room for as many people as possible, the captain dumped weapons and cargo into the sea. With none less than 14,000 on board, the voyage of freedom and human rights crossed the mine-infested seas of death without a single casualty and became a flawless success. Between the departure from Hungnam Port on December 23, 1950, and the arrival at Kojedo in the South Seas on December 25th, even 5 children were born on board. This was a Christmas miracle, the greatest humanitarian operation in human history. And 2 years later, in 1952, the current president, Moon Jae-in, was born in Kojedo Island near Busan, where his parents disembarked from the SS Meredith Victory. So had it not been for the warriors of Chosin Reservoir, had the Hungnam evacuation operation not been successful, our President Moon Jae-in's life would not have begun as it had, and he would not be here today. And as for my father as well, my father was 14 years old when the Korean War broke out, and he was located in the southwestern part of Korea. And at that time, the North Korean People's Army, when they were invading, they would pick these young boys, whoever is capable of fighting, and put him into forcefully fighting for them. And my father and my uncle, my father's older brother, thankfully were lucky enough to flee that and came all the way to Busan. And they were able to safely survive in Busan, and that became their new home. So how could one ever put into words the gratitude, the sacrifice, and the devotion of the Korean War veterans? Words like respect and gratitude simply are not enough. It is deeply moving to see the love for humanity that the United States military showed. In the most pressing moment, the United States did not only withdraw its soldiers, but also helped countless refugees escape North Korea. And so this is why the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, Chosin Reservoir, and the Hungnam evacuation operation are the greatest victories in the military history of the world. The Republic of Korea remembers the sacrifice and devotion of all veterans. Our memories of gratitude and respect will continue forever. And this is how the Korea-United States alliance came to be forged in blood in the fires of the battlefield. This alliance was not made by signing sheets of paper, and as was in the case in the life of President Moon, this alliance is closely linked to the lives of each and every citizen in both of our countries. Today, this alliance has also evolved from a military alliance to a comprehensive strategic alliance and global partnership with a view to coping with various global challenges jointly together throughout such fields as counterterrorism, non-proliferation, climate change, development aid, and human rights, just to name a few. But today, the North Korea continues to pose threats to peace and security on the Korean Peninsula, as well as the international community with its nuclear and missile provocations, despite repeated international reprimand, continuing to violate relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions. And we have fresh new United Nations Security Council resolutions, which was adopted on Monday. And through that, we continuously have to continue the pressure and also the sanctions on North Korea. The world must be united in its voice in continuing that pressure on North Korea. And the North Korean regime should also acknowledge that denuclearization is the only genuine path towards guaranteeing its security and economic development. So instead of reckless provocations, North Korea should promptly come out to the path of dialogue for denuclearization. If North Korea continues its nuclear and missile provocations, the government of the Republic of Korea will respond strongly based upon a stalwart Republic of Korea United States alliance. The Republic of Korea maintains a robust readiness posture capable of responding to any threats by North Korea and will remain steadfast in safeguarding the lives of its people and the security of the nations. And just to pinpoint out, I wonder if you have seen the New York Times today. On the front page, there's an article about Seoul. And then the title says, Seoul plans a decapitation unit to menace the North. And it reads, I'd just like to share with you, the last time South Korea is known to have plotted to assassinate the North Korean leadership, nothing went as planned. In the 1960s, after North Korean commandos tried to ransack the presidential palace in Seoul, South Korea secretly trained misfits plucked from prison or off the streets to sneak into North Korea and slit the throat of its leader, Kim Il-sung. When the mission was aborted, the men mutinied. And so I can go on, and if you have the chance to read the article, please read. But the South Korean government, the defense officials, has announced that it has set up a decapitation unit to menace the North. So this is a sign of showing that at the moment the current situation is in the peninsula is becoming great, but we will always maintain a robust alliance, and through that alliance, I'm sure that we will be able to overcome the instability on the Korean Peninsula. And I'd just like to finally take this moment to ask you to join me in giving a big round of applause to the Korean War veterans and to our...
When I was stationed in Korea from 1992 to 94, they had a Return to Korea program for veterans. And the veterans would come over and they would see Korea, remembering how it was when they were there, and seeing it. They say, geez, we really won, didn't we? And they did. And the United States played a big role in Korea coming back. And remember, Republic of Korea South Korea was primarily agriculture, and North Korea was their industry before the war. Well, Bechtel, the company that George Schultz was president of for a while, and I was fortunate to work for, did an amazing thing. They built the first 3 power plants in South Korea pro bono that got them started to become the economic miracle they are. And I was really proud to work for Bechtel because I thought, and the Koreans were very grateful too, but I thought that really made a difference because you need power to do anything in industry.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Yeah.
but Don, we have some awards, I think.
What I'd like to now do is to present an award of honor to a great American, a person who's really been wonderful for not only the Marine Corps and her wonderful husband, Honorable George Schultz, and but I'm going to present the award of honor to Protocol Chair Charlotte Schultz. And this award of honor is presented to Protocol Chair Charlotte Schultz for her outstanding support in recognizing those who served and those who gave their lives in this noble cause of the Korean War. From the very beginning, she joined this effort to recognize this war, which stopped communism and led to peace and freedom for the people of South Korea. From those who fought there, thank you. Semper Fi, Charlotte, United States Marine Corps Coordinating Council of Northern California.
Look at this.
There you go. Please.
Thank you, Don. When I see and hear these gentlemen that Marines who fought in that war, I feel very humbled to get any kind of an award. It makes me teary. So, and the young man who's going, Semper Fi. You know, when I say humble, I'm looking at Don Reid, who's my neighbor, and I know how hard he worked to make the memorial that's in the Presidio work. I mean, really dedicated, and John was there by your side as well as many others. And it is the most beautiful, beautiful memorial. It's in the Presidio, and I hope most of you have gone there. And it looks out at, across the ocean where this terrible war took place. And there are places to sit and think about it, and think about the men and women who fought, who came back, and most particularly those who didn't come back. A little story about this is I was in Japan or someplace with Dianne Feinstein, Senator Feinstein, there in the mayor, and she said, Charlotte, I want you to come back and I want you to be chairman of the 50th anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge. So I thought, well, that's pretty easy to do. So I came back and I went before the board and I said, I want to close the bridge for a day and people are going to walk across as they did 50 years ago, and the whole day. And they said, you can't do it. I said, why not? Why not? They said, well, somebody's getting married in Marin, and they have to get there, or whatever, they're having a baby. I said, there's a boat, you know? They could do that. At any rate, I didn't win. There was somebody from Los Angeles that they hired, and so he got up and he had this big presentation with a wand with a light on it and so forth, and he's told what he was going to do, and 40,000 people would come. And I got up and I said, 1 million people will come. And 1 million people did come, and you know, that beautiful bridge flattened out. But they were good builders, and it popped back up. Yeah. But here's the reason I thought that 1 million people would come. I got letters from people that said they got engaged on that bridge. Their baby, when it was born, they pushed it across the bridge. Their mother or father worked on the bridge at one time or another to build it, or many other reasons that, you know, it meant a great deal to them, and they wanted to be there to walk across the bridge. They were going to barbecue. They were going to, what else? Well, there wasn't that much room. I think we lost 96 children, but we found them. But here's what really moved me, was that the letters that I got from mothers, brothers, fathers, that said they were either in the military for the wars, in the Korean War, and they embarked from San Francisco underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. And that meant a great deal to them and to their relatives. But then it was also people who did not come back. And they saw their loved one go under that bridge and to go to a war. And they wanted to be there to remember that person. It meant a great deal to them. So I thought, and people were coming. These weren't just people from San Francisco. They were coming from all over because this meant a lot to them and their family. So I knew that they would be there. And so they did come. But now we have this, and I just want to end with that story, is that when it was over, I went to the board because we have to report everything. And the gentleman from Los Angeles, I said to him, I said, why did you think 40,000 would come, and I thought 1 million? He said, well, that's how many people that can get there by bus. Well, I think they are. Idiots around here. They came by boat, they helicoptered in, they slept there all night and so forth. But here's the point, is that this memorial is in the most beautiful spot, and I guess this recognition had a little bit to do with helping to be a part of finding that spot. But it looks out across this ocean where the war was fought. And there's a place to meditate. There's a place to really think about and to take some time to think about those people who went and those people who didn't come back. So it's a beautiful, beautiful place that I hope you will go to. And lastly, where is Mike? Where'd he go?
I'm here.
Oh, you're there. And Mike Mayat, I just wanted to add that he has done so much to make this Marines Memorial what it is. He's added so much to San Francisco, this Marine right there, and he is chairman of the Fleet Week, which is wonderful, which I hope you'll all come out to. It's in a few weeks. But he's really been a leader in making that happen and making it something that is going to be educational for all of our service people in the police, fire department, to get together and know what to do if there is some emergency. And so, Mike, you're really something else. And Don, thank you for this, and those who gave me this. It's really a great honor, and to see how hard you worked. Maybe I should give this back to you.
No.
And there is Helen. Behind every good Marine is a great wife. There she is, Helen. So, thank you. And lastly, if you haven't lived with a Marine, you haven't lived. George Schultz.
What I'd like to do also is to make an award of honor to U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein. And the award reads, "This award of honor is presented to U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein for her outstanding support in recognizing those who served and those who gave their lives in the noble cause of the Korean War. And from the very beginning, she joined in our effort to recognize this war and to stop communism, and which led to the peace and freedom of the people of South Korea. And from those who fought there, thank you and Semper Fi." And we have from Senator Feinstein's office, Ms. Abigail Ellis, to receive this honor. Please, Abigail.
Thank you so much.
Yes, would you say a few words?
Of course. Hi, I'm Abigail Ellis from Senator Feinstein's office, and thank you so much for this award. She regrets that she was not able to be here tonight with you all, but she's so pleased to have this, and I can't wait to show it to her the next time that she's in our beautiful city. Thank you all for your service, and thank you, Don.
The Chosin Reservoir battle is the most studied battle in the world. Now, how do I know that? Well, I went to China with General Vesey in 1985. It was the first trip of any U.S. military to China since Mao Zedong had taken over in 1949. We went there and he agreed, General Vesey agreed, and he was Army, he agreed to speak at their war college. And he was there and he gave a good speech. It was translated and everything. After it was over, he took questions. And the very first question was, "General Vesey, were you at the Chosin Reservoir?" He said, "No, I was not." In the crowd, you could see, oh my God, you know. And the president of the university had to calm him down. And he said, "Mr. General Vesey, the reason they're acting like that is that they're required to study the Chosin battle and to write a report on it and what they would do different. And they thought that anybody that rose to any kind of rank in the military in the United States must have fought in that battle." So I have to tell you, it is the most studied battle just because the number of people that are studying it. But this has been a nice event. If you'll join me at the bar, we'll have a glass of wine. I want to recognize all the Korean War veterans. Would you stand up? Thank you so much for coming here tonight. Thank you again. And be sure to register for the George Schultz lecture with Admiral Savaritis next week, a week from tonight. And we'll see you then.